Boeing has finally broken its silence. After years of delays, setbacks, and growing criticism from airlines, the company has just admitted something that could shake the future of commercial aviation. The long-awaited 777X, once promised as the ultimate long-haul aircraft, will not arrive on time yet again. Instead, Boeing has confirmed another major delay, shifting its delivery timeline to 2026. But the truth behind this announcement goes far deeper than just another missed deadline. It exposes hidden cracks in Boeing's culture, growing frustration among its biggest customers, and a new opening for Airbus to dominate the skies. So, what exactly did Boeing reveal? Why has the 777X become one of the most troubled aircraft programs in modern history? And what does this mean for the future of the airline industry? Let's unpack the full story. Back in the 1990s, Boeing couldn't have imagined the storm that would come decades later. In 1995, the very first 777 took to the skies, flying passengers from London Heathrow to Washington Dulles. Almost instantly, it became an icon. Airlines loved it for its fuel efficiency, range, and reliability. Cargo operators rushed to secure the freighter version, praising its economics. The 777 quickly became Boeing's golden goose, with hundreds of orders rolling in. By the early 2000s, it wasn't just another wide-body jet, it was the backbone of long-haul travel around the world. But time doesn't wait for anyone, not even for a legend. By the late 2000s, the 777 was showing its age. The competition was heating up. Airbus launched the sleek, efficient A350, while Boeing itself pushed the Dreamliner, the 787, as a revolutionary aircraft. Suddenly, the 777 didn't look so modern anymore. Airlines wanted more seats, lower fuel burn, and quieter engines. Boeing needed an answer. In 2013, at the Dubai Air Show, Boeing unveiled its ambitious solution, the 777X. A stretched fuselage, massive new composite wings with folding tips, and cutting-edge Guy-9X engines. Boeing promised the jet would be 12% more fuel efficient than any rival and would be ready for service by 2020. The industry went wild. Airlines placed huge orders, with 259 commitments worth $95 billion secured almost immediately. This wasn't just a new aircraft, it was supposed to be the future of long-haul aviation. But Boeing's bold promise soon unraveled. Everything seemed on track until 2019, just before flight tests were set to begin. Engineers discovered a serious problem with the GE9X engines, the most powerful commercial jet engines ever built. The issue? Premature wear on the compressor's stator vanes, critical components that guide airflow into the combustion chamber. These parts were failing much faster than expected, creating dangerously high exhaust temperatures. General Electric had no choice but to redesign the system, sending Boeing back to the waiting game. The fix took months, pushing engine certification into late 2019. That delay pushed Boeing's entire flight test campaign into 2020, disrupting the carefully planned timeline. But the engine wasn't Boeing's only problem. In the same year, the 777X faced another nightmare. During a static stress test where aircraft are deliberately pushed beyond their limits, a cargo door blew off the test frame. The incident shocked regulators. The FAA quickly raised concerns, demanding stricter scrutiny of Boeing's structural designs. The 2020 target for certification was slipping away fast. Boeing reassured airlines that it could still make up the time. But then came a disruption no one could control. 2020 brought the COVID-19 pandemic. And with it, chaos across the aerospace industry. Supply chains froze, employees were forced into lockdown, and Boeing's development lines ground to a halt. Even worse, in the middle of all this, regulators uncovered another troubling issue. During testing, a 777X experienced an uncommanded pitch event, where the plane unexpectedly changed altitude without pilot input. For the FAA, that was a red flag. The regulator accused Boeing of being overly optimistic about its progress and warned that certification would not come before 2023. The message was clear. the 777X would face a far tougher certification process than Boeing had planned for, and the setbacks kept piling up in 2022. Just as testing was gaining momentum again, another crisis hit. A GE9X engine overheated mid-flight, triggering emergency shutdowns and grounding the test fleet. After thousands of hours of flight time, Boeing had to strip the engine, ship it back to GE's Ohio facility, and run extensive investigations. Then, in 2024, cracks were discovered in the thrust links, the very parts that mount the engines to the aircraft. Once again, testing was halted. Each problem not only pushed timelines back, but also eroded airlines' confidence in Boeing's promises. But the biggest blow came not from the machines, but from the people who built them. Boeing's silence during these setbacks only made things worse. Airlines that had invested billions were kept in the dark. Emirates, the largest 777X customer with over 200 orders, openly blasted Boeing. CEO Tim Clark said, "We need airplanes. And we need them now." The airline even spent $2 billion retrofitting older 777s to keep them flying while waiting for the 777X. Cathay Pacific, Qatar Airways, Lufthansa, British Airways, and Singapore Airlines all voiced similar frustrations. The message was the same: stop hiding. Tell us when our planes are really coming. Some airlines lost patience entirely, turning to Airbus instead. Emirates signed for 65 Airbus A350s. Cathay Pacific ordered 30 A330 Neos and 6 A350. Every lost order strengthened Boeing's European rival. Still, Boeing stayed mostly silent. Until now, in 2025, Boeing finally broke its silence. The company admitted the truth. The 777X would not be delivered in 2025. The new target, 2026, 6 years later than originally promised, Lufthansa was confirmed as the launch customer. Boeing also admitted that FAA audits had uncovered shocking lapses in safety standards. Out of 89 audits, Boeing failed 33, with 97 non-compliance issues. These findings confirmed what whistleblowers and critics had been saying for years, that Boeing's culture had prioritized speed and profits over safety and quality. But under new CEO Kelly Ortberg, Boeing promised a reset. Ortberg announced that Boeing would now prioritize safety above profits. The company even made the painful choice to cut 17,000 jobs in a sweeping restructuring plan. The goal: reset Boeing's culture, rebuild its reputation, and ensure the 777X entered service without a single shadow of doubt. Boeing also confirmed it had developed a permanent fix for the thrust link problem. Engineers redesigned the part, ran extensive tests, and applied improvements across the test fleet. The fix cleared the way for certification to finally move forward. For the first time in years, Boeing signaled that it was taking transparency seriously. But not everyone was convinced. Airbus now finds itself in a prime position. With demand for long-haul travel surging, airlines need reliable deliveries fast. Airbus has aggressively pitched the A350-1000 and its freighter version, the A350F, as ready-now solutions. Emirates, Cathay Pacific, and others are already signing big deals with Airbus. If more airlines follow their lead, Boeing could lose decades of market dominance. Some analysts even believe Airbus might seize the moment to launch an all-new A390, cementing its lead in the long-haul segment, just as Boeing struggles to fix its broken culture. So, what does Boeing's announcement really mean? On the surface, it's another delayed, just one more missed deadline in a long line of failures. But, at its core, it's about whether Boeing can repair its reputation, rebuild airline trust, and deliver the 777X without compromise. If it succeeds, the 777X could restore Boeing's place at the top of the industry. If it fails, Airbus may finally seize permanent control of the skies. The battle for the future of aviation is far from over. But one thing is clear: the story of the 777X is no longer just about an aeroplane, it's about Boeing's survival. So, what do you think? Will Boeing finally turn the tide? Or is Airbus about to secure its greatest victory yet? Behind the glossy PR statements, insiders were painting a darker picture. Several Boeing engineers quietly came forward, claiming management ignored early warnings about the 777X. They said unrealistic deadlines pushed teams to cut corners, reuse older systems, and downplay failures. One leaked memo even showed internal frustration. "We are not ready. Rushing certification will lead to disaster." Yet management pressed ahead. Only after the FAA intervened did Boeing admit the scale of its problems. The leaks spread online, fueling the narrative that Boeing's culture had rotted since the 737 MAX crisis, where cost-cutting and secrecy directly contributed to 2 fatal crashes. To many, the 777X delays weren't just bad luck. They were proof that Boeing had never truly reformed. The 777X delays also caught the attention of US lawmakers. Boeing isn't just an airplane manufacturer, it's a cornerstone of America's aerospace industry. Thousands of jobs depend on it, billions in exports ride on it, and the company's influence in Washington is legendary. By 2024, congressional hearings demanded answers. Lawmakers pressed Boeing executives about missed deadlines, safety failures, and lost credibility. Some even asked if Boeing's mismanagement was handing Airbus an uncontested monopoly in the long-haul market. The FAA, under fire for being too cozy with Boeing in the past, doubled down. Inspectors were embedded directly inside Boeing's factories, monitoring every stage of the 777X program. For the first time in decades, Boeing wasn't just under scrutiny, it was under surveillance. After immense pressure and criticism from airlines following the continued delays in the delivery of the Boeing 77X, Boeing has finally broken its silence and dropped a shocking announcement. This announcement is seen to be a way of bowing, eventually admitting that the situation might be worse than people think, and that the 777X might once again fail to be certified as expected. So, what exactly has Boeing said about the 777X? And what does this announcement mean for the company, its industry rivals, and the larger commercial aviation industry? Stay tuned as we unpack everything. Before we even delve into Boeing's shocker about the 777X, we first need to look into why the company deemed it fit to add such an aircraft into its portfolio in the first place. The story traces its origin way back in 1990, when Boeing first announced the decision to develop the original 777. Fast forward to 1995, and that aircraft took to the skies for the first time, carrying passengers on a United Airlines flight from London Heathrow to Washington Dulles. What Boeing did not know is that with the 777, it had struck gold. In the following years, the airliner secured hundreds of orders from airlines that were desperate to add it to their fleets, and it was not just the passenger variant. Instead, the cargo variant was also proving to be an instant market hit, with air cargo operators hailing it for its fuel efficiency, as well as favorable operating margins. Boeing went on to develop 2 more variants of the wide-body airliner, the 777-200 and the 777-300. However, despite being a darling of airlines, the 777 started falling out of favor toward the end of the 2000s. This was occasioned by the aircraft showing signs of aging, as well as there being better options in the market that were promising better operational and fuel efficiency, and that is the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the Airbus A350. Although both of these aircraft were still in the production phase, they posed a significant threat to the 777, so much so that Boeing had to make a decision. In November 2013, during that year's Dubai Air Show, the American aircraft manufacturer announced the decision to develop a new variant of the 777 wide-body airliner. The new aircraft would be known as the 777X. This new variant would feature a flush-stretched fuselage and would also have new engines that were more modern, fuel-efficient, and quieter than those powering the older variant. According to an official statement from the company, the aircraft would be up to 12% more fuel-efficient than any other competing jet, placing it in a class of its own. Boeing even went on to make a bold commitment. It would have the new aircraft ready for commercial service by 2020. Airlines were fully persuaded that the the 777X was the wildcard that would help them enhance their competitiveness in the industry. Within no time, orders started pouring in. The expectations were so high that during the airshow, the company secured orders for 259 units of the new aircraft, spread across 4 customers in Europe and the Middle East. The combined value of these orders was estimated to be about $95 billion. But here we are 5 years later, and the much-hyped 7X is yet to make it into passenger service. Even more telling, Boeing is still waiting on certification from both the Federal Aviation Administration and the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. So, the big question now is what's causing the holdup with the 7X? Now, everything was going well for Boeing and the 777X program until 2019. Just a year before the aircraft was slated to enter commercial service, shortly before commencing test flights, the engineering team that was tasked with conducting endurance tests on the GE9X engine discovered an issue with its compressor component, the component responsible for squeezing air before it enters the combustion chamber. Specifically, the team discovered premature wear on the second-stage stator vanes, which guide airflow between rotating components. These vanes were deteriorating faster than expected, producing higher exhaust temperatures and threatening the overall durability of the engine. As a result, General Electric was compelled to go back to the drawing board and do a complete redesign of the stator vane assembly, reinforcing them for greater longevity and shipping the updated parts back to Boeing. This delay meant that the final validation of the redesign component could not be done, at least not until November 2019. As such, the engine certification process by the Federal Aviation Administration was pushed into the autumn. The ripple effect of that was evident. The flight test campaign of the 777X was also pushed from 2019 into early 2020 in a move that upset Boeing's original plan for a 2020 in-service entry. Boeing's troubles with the 777X did not stop at that. In that same year, a door blew off the static frame during an ultimate load test. In fact, this was supposed to be the final structural inspection by officials from the Federal Aviation Administration. It turned out that the essence of this test was to push the plane beyond its limit as a measure of ascertaining that it can withstand even the worst of conditions during flight. During the test process, Boeing engineers had the static frame pressurized and loaded beyond capacity. They also bent its wings beyond the threshold in a way that was almost certain never to happen in a real-world scenario. Now, with the door blowing off the static airframe, it was evident that Boeing had not done its homework well, and the aircraft's structural integrity could not be trusted in case the situation became extreme. With that, it was now clear that Boeing would not meet its 2020 timeline. The American aircraft manufacturer was still adamant that these setbacks would not affect the delivery timeline significantly. However, what happened in 2020 disrupted everything. It was during this period that the world was brought to a standstill by the CO-9 pandemic. The global supply chain stalled, and this meant one thing. Boeing could not get the parts and components needed to continue developing the 777X on time. To add insult to injury, the directive by the World Health Organization on avoiding physical contact and unnecessary social gatherings meant that Boeing's employees could not go to work. With that, work on the 777X stalled for a considerable period of time. Then came 2021, and Boeing's hopes of getting the aircraft certified and ready for commercial service were dashed once again. This is after the Federal Aviation Administration notified the plane maker that it would not certify the aircraft before mid-2023. This delay stemmed from concerns the regulator raised in a formal letter to Boeing, citing issues with the aircraft's design, maturity, and stability. The regulator cited an example of major red flags that informed its decision not to certify the jet before the mentioned date. It mentioned a 2020 incident when the 777X experienced an uncommanded pitch event where the aircraft changed altitude without pilot input. The Federal Aviation Administration also went further to point out that Boeing was at the time presenting overly optimistic assumptions about the progress of the development process. As a result, the regulator made it clear the 7X would be subject to a more stringent certification process that could also take longer than initially expected. You might think that this would mark the end of Boeing's troubles, but that was not the case. In fact, it is safe to say that this was just a tip of the iceberg, and more problems would rock the planemaker's ship. In 2022, the GE9X engine powering the new jet experienced yet another issue. This time, the engine triggered a temperature alert mid-flight, prompting an immediate shutdown of the hot-running core during routine testing from Seattle to Moses Lake. This setback prompted Boeing to ground the flight test aircraft and remove the higher engine, which had logged over 1,700 flight hours in 2,600 cycles. The engine would then be transported to General Electric's Peebles facility in Ohio for in-depth inspection. Upon further investigation and ground testing, the temperature spike was confirmed as a real technical fault rather than a sensor glitch, once again triggering a halt to the certification process as both Boeing and General Electric worked round the clock to resolve the issue. Again, in 2024, Boeing found itself in the limelight again concerning the 777X program. And it was for all the wrong reasons. In August of that year, a routine post-flight inspection resulted in the discovery of cracks in the thrust links that mount the engine to the airframe. A statement by the plane maker read, "During scheduled maintenance, we identified a component that did not perform as designed. Our team is replacing the part and capturing any learnings from the component and will resume flight testing when ready." Once again, this meant that Boeing had to halt test flights and address the problem further, pushing the delivery timeline and infuriating airlines even more. And there's more. In September 2024, nearly 33,000 Boeing machinists went on strike, bringing major production lines to a standstill, including the 777X1. With so many skilled workers off the job, Boeing was practically not in a position to maintain the same operational efficiency in these production lines. This meant that assembly work on the 777X was disrupted, and in some cases, engineers had to work out of sequence just to keep things moving. Needless to say, the strike led to delays, extra rework, and missed deadlines. The strike did more than just stall factory work. Instead, it also delayed flight testing and slowed down the aircraft's path to certification by the Federal Aviation Administration. On a closer look at all these developments, it is easy to detect a pattern. Throughout it all,